Dear friends, tonight we celebrate the centennial anniversary of Temple Emanu-El's women's auxiliary, the Women of Emanu-El. But the seeds of today's success were actually planted more than 130 years ago. In 1888, Temple Emanu-El established an auxiliary it called the Sisterhood for Personal Service, which served New Yorkers in need, including children and working women without child care. Soon, what began at Emanu-El was emulated by other synagogues around the country as temple sisterhoods started building religious schools and teaching trade skills. The women of Emanu-El served as volunteers in the family court system and even opened a settlement house on East 82nd Street. The Sisterhood for Personal Service became the principal outreach and social service arm of our temple. In time, the philanthropic and volunteer efforts of our sisterhood were incorporated into the work of the Federation of Jewish Philanthropies, and the Temple Emanu-El Sisterhood for Personal Service closed. But the story didn't end there. The Reform Movement's National Federation of Temple Sisterhoods, which had long been inspired by Emanu-El's efforts, wrote to the congregation in hopes that a new organization would be established. And at Temple President Louis Marshall's urging, our Women's Auxiliary was born, meeting for the first time on April 27th, 1922. And it quickly took off both in popularity and purpose. The organization, soon counting many hundreds of members, became, from the moment of its creation, central to Emanu-El's programming for all ages and important to the Reform movement. The Women's Auxiliary provided scholarships for students at the Hebrew Union College, supported Jews studying at Columbia University, and participated in the work of the National Conference of Christians and Jews. Its efforts during World War II are legendary. In the years before America entered the conflict, the WA welcomed and supported refugees from Nazi Germany, and together with the USO and the Jewish Welfare Board, opened a canteen downstairs in Wise Hall. And then, after Pearl Harbor, its members trained as nurses' assistants, established a Red Cross unit in this building, and prepared perhaps 1 million surgical dressings. In short, the women of Emanu-El said yes to every possible opportunity to strengthen the Jewish community and advance Jewish values in the wider world. And in the 100 years since its founding, that has not changed. Whether for the temple's members or the global Jewish community or the world beyond the Jewish community, whatever the need, whenever called upon, the women of Emanu-El continue to say yes. Their efforts continue to inspire. Today, those efforts include educational tours throughout the greater New York area, monthly book clubs, canasta and mahjong, all of which strengthen the bonds between our congregants in meaningful and enjoyable ways. But true to their history and religious commitments, the women of Emanu-El reach well beyond our own membership to answer the needs of the wider community through offerings for veterans, English instruction for immigrants, art programs for seniors, supply drives for underprivileged children, and volunteer service at the Ronald McDonald House. And that's just a sampling of their wonderful contributions. Simply put, the women of Emanu-El is and are a precious part of this congregation. And that is, in significant measure, because of the leadership of Leslie Hecht, who follows in a long line of wonderful presidents. She and her fellow officers and board members have guided the organization not just through a name change, but into a new period of new vibrancy and new creativity. I am so grateful to Leslie for what she brings to Temple Emanu-El every day, and I'm honored to call upon her now.
This is certainly a wonderful and momentous time for the women of Emanu-El, now celebrating our 100th year. I would like to thank Rabbi Davidson for honoring us at this Sabbath service in recognition for all our initiatives to our greater community and our unwavering support of our beloved Emanu-El. This is a perfect opportunity to let you know some of the activities that the women of Emanu-El are involved in and who the women of Emanu-El are. Annually, since 1969, we have donated generous funds towards our magnificent sukkah. I hope everyone was able to delight in its beauty and glory this month. Our Veterans Event Initiative was established in 1940, is as important in our dedication and devotion today as it was then. Annually, we take 50 veterans to a Yankee game. In 1947, in celebration of our 25th birthday, as a gift to the temple, we furnished the 6th-floor lounge. Since 1951, our clergy has been giving monthly scintillating book discussions. Established in 1968, our English in Action program, along with the English Speaking Union, provides one-on-one conversational sessions between students and the Women of Emanu-El tutors. The Art Center at Emanu-El for Seniors is a weekly outreach art and exercise program where senior citizens meet at Temple Emanu-El each Monday from November through May to participate in art projects and a yoga class, as well as to socialize. Professional art instructors oversee activities and are assisted by the Women of Emanu-El volunteers. Each year's program ends with an annual art show. To celebrate our confirmands' special moment, we gift them each a mezuzah. We also contribute to the Bar and Bat Mitzvah Kiddush Cups. Since 2005, every month, we have provided dinners at Ronald McDonald House for the children that are undergoing treatment and their families. And a few years later, we expanded our program to provide monthly breakfast bags to our initiative. In 2006, Project Backpack was initiated, where we provided school supplies for kindergarten children on the first day of school. And lastly, our incredible programs provide a continuous consolidation of academic, religious, instructional, and innovating activities in a warm and welcoming environment, open to all members of the Emanu-El community. In these challenging times, it is special to be honored and to have the Emanu-El community recognize and value the accomplishments of the women of Emanu-El have made for the past 100 years. Thank you very much once again for this beautiful honor. The women of Emanu-El are so very grateful.
And now it is my privilege to invite all of those members of the Women of Emanu-El who are present to come stand in the front of the sanctuary so that I might ask God's blessing on them before you. Mishaberach avotenu Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov, v'imotenu Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, v'Leah. May the one who blessed our fathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and our mothers Sarah, Rebekah, Rachel, and Leah, bless these women who represent the very best of synagogue life. May they continue to find fulfillment in their service to our congregation, our people, and the values precious to us. May they lead with the wisdom of Bruriah and the courage of Miriam. May our rich and beautiful tradition always be a tree of life for them. Through their efforts, may our beloved Emanu-El be sustained and strengthened. May they and those precious to them be blessed with health and happiness for many years to come. And may they know our deepest thanks for the light of leadership and the spirit of friendship they kindle for our community. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May God bless you and keep you. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka. May the light of God's face shine upon you, and may God be gracious to you. Yis Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May God lift his face toward you and bless you with peace. Amen. All our thanks. And now it is my great delight to introduce our most honored guest. From its inception, Temple Emanu-El Sisterhood served as an inspiration for sisterhoods around the country and the National Federation of Temple Sisterhoods itself. In time, the NFTS became the Women of Reform Judaism, which is today led by the brilliant Rabbi Marla J. Feldman. Executive Director of WRJ since 2012, Rabbi Feldman is also a lawyer and the former director of the Commission on Social Action of Reform Judaism and Director of Development for the Union of Reform Judaism. Before joining the staff of the Reform movement, she served in the Jewish community relations field in Detroit and Delaware, where she also taught law. Along the way, she has served congregations in Sarasota and Orlando, too. Today, Rabbi Feldman represents the Reform movement in numerous coalitions. She has served on many nonprofit boards, including the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations, the Saved Our Four Coalition, the Jewish Council for Public Affairs, Rabbis for Human Rights North America, the Jewish Coalition for Disaster Relief, and the Interagency Task Force on Israeli-Arab issues. And hers is an important Jewish voice in the fight for reproductive justice. Rabbi Feldman's articles and op-eds have appeared in Jewish publications nationwide. She writes modern midrash, which have been published in numerous magazines, and now she has authored a book on that subject titled Biblical Women Speak, Hearing Their Voices Through New and Ancient Midrash, which will be published by JPS next summer. I am delighted to welcome to the pulpit Rabbi Marla Feldman.
Shabbat Shalom. Can you all hear me? Thank you very much, Rabbi. That was a lovely introduction, and I'm so honored to be with you tonight to help celebrate the Centennial of Women of Emanu-El. For 100 years, the women of this congregation have worked together to educate your youth, to support your clergy, to fund congregational projects, and to provide those special touches that enrich your worship and your holiday celebrations, like Sukkot, which your sukkah was just beautiful. I saw it online. The Women's Auxiliary, and now Women of Emanu-El, has provided opportunities for women to develop leadership skills and experiences. It has mobilized women for the important causes of the day and through its membership in Women of Reform Judaism, it has connected women from this community with a vibrant and powerful network of Reform Jewish women around the world. There is indeed so much to celebrate in marking this milestone anniversary. It is, I think, poignant that this celebration is taking place this week when we read Parashat Noah, the third of the biblical creation stories in the book of Genesis. Last week, we read Parashat Bereshit, which offers two versions of creation that are somewhat in tension with one another. In the first version of creation, men and women are created on the sixth day. They're created equal, both in the image of God, both empowered and independent creations. In the second version of creation, God creates Adam, a lonely male among the animals and plants in the Garden of Eden. Eve was created only as an afterthought to provide Adam with a helpmate and a companion. Adam would soon learn that his partner had a mind of her own. She did not always do as she was told. She was determined to seek the fruit of knowledge despite the consequences that might follow. And now this week, we read the recreation story of Noah. In this tale, women are present, and yet they're nameless. We see males and females, the twosies that entered the ark together. Noah's wife and sons' wives joined them on the ark, but they do not speak, and they have no role in the story as it has been transmitted to us. And even at the end, when God places the rainbow in the sky as a sign of the pledge that God would never again destroy the world, that covenant was made with Noah and his sons, not with the women. The tension among these various stories seems obvious. Are women and men equal, endowed with equal rights and privileges, both created in the image of God? Or is woman's role to bear the children and care for the men who are the real governors of the garden? Is our role to silently trail after our mates, clean up after them in the ark, and follow them wherever they lead? From the moment of creation, the role of women in society in general and women and Jewish life in particular has been somewhat ambiguous. Honored, yet not really equal. Occasionally given a voice, but not a vote. Sheltered, but not always secure. Endowed with certain rights and privileges, but little freedom. Each of these creation stories reflect a different role for women in society and are illustrative of women of Emanu-El's own creation story 100 years ago. When your women's group was founded, women had just gained the right to vote, and in most states, they still could not own property in their own name. They were not allowed to serve on congregational boards, or even in most communities, sit on the bima. They were not known by their own names, but they were known by their husbands' names. Your congregation's archives records the name of the first president of your women's group as Mrs. I.N. Spiegelberg. Sadly, in many cases, we will never know the given names of many of our founding mothers. They are lost to history along with the names of Noah's wife and his daughters and too many other women on our family tree. Despite the ambivalence around the role of women in Jewish life, these women leaned in. They sought their rightful place in a Jewish world in which up until then only men had held the reins of power and the keys to temple leadership. Once organized, women of Emanu-El immediately joined the newly formed National Federation of Temple Sisterhoods, as you heard from the rabbi a few moments ago, now called Women of Reform Judaism. And that organization linked them with a network of hundreds of other Reform sisterhoods throughout North America. When we read the history of WRJ and the sisterhoods, we learn that 100 years ago, Reform women wrestled with many of the same challenges that we face today: assimilation, intermarriage, the challenge of engaging the next generation. And they came together for the same reasons women still come together today: for sisterhood, for spirituality, and to pursue social justice. In the early years, the priority of these women's groups was to extend the traditional woman's role from the home into the communal life. They created and ran religious schools, planned holiday celebrations, and of course, they ran the kitchen and the oneg. Like the missing and unnamed women of our Jewish history, they were there, but often in the background. They provided important supportive roles, but they did not have a say in the sacred life of the community. The women of our movement proved very good at organizing and at fundraising. In addition to the work that they did in their local communities, WRJ became the most consistent and dependable source of funding for all of the arms of the Reform movement, providing scholarships for HUC students, launching the Reform movement's college outreach and camping programs, establishing NFTY, the National Federation of Temple Youth. The women literally helped build the infrastructure of the Reform movement by raising funds for the first dormitory at the Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati. They also purchased the land for the headquarters of the Union for Reform Judaism right across the street from Emanu-El. They built the conference center at the Reform movement's world headquarters in Jerusalem and numerous Reform facilities in Israel, and an untold number of schools, sanctuaries, social halls, and, as you heard, lounges in congregations. The women of Emanu-El played an active role in these endeavors, and we owe all of you a debt of gratitude for your contributions to these efforts. All in, over the past 100 years, the women of our movement have raised hundreds of millions of dollars to train our professional leaders, to educate and inspire our youth, to establish a sturdy foundation for Reform institutions. How did we do that? We did all of that by selling uniongrams and art calendars, establishing gift shops, holding rummage sales, while at the same time running the religious school seders and supporting the holiday celebrations of the kids in the youth group, performing charitable activities for those in need, putting Shabbat dinner on the table, and serving tea at the oneg. Like the old television commercial some of you may remember, we can bring home the bacon and fry it up in a pan. And yet all of these incredible successes of organized sisterhoods, well, that was not enough for our foremothers. They wanted more. They wanted a role in deciding the future of the Reform movement. They wanted to stand together equally with the men in ritual and in the spiritual life of the community. They took off their white serving gloves and they demanded to be given a place in leadership, claiming for themselves a seat on the board of the URJ, the Union for Reform Judaism, as well as in local congregations. In 1932, the women of Emanu-El claimed a seat on this temple's board, to be held by the auxiliary president at the time, Mrs. E.B. Shulkin. Moving beyond its traditional support role, the mission of WRJ and its members quickly expanded to leadership development for women and girls and education for them. In the time that your sisterhood was established, women had no recognized role in crafting the language of prayer, or in creating Reform movement liturgy, or in leading worship. They could print cookbooks, but not prayer books. They could sing in choirs, but they couldn't lead worship. The leaders of WRJ, the women of Emanu-El, changed all of that. What we take for granted today was no small thing 100 years ago. Reformed Jewish women in your congregation and elsewhere shattered the glass mechitza. They began in the 1920s by publishing books of prayer written by and for women, which we still continue to publish today in our Covenant book series. By the 1930s, the women were volunteering to fill in for vacationing clergy and could be found leading worship, speaking from the Bima, and, heavens to Betsy, actually reading from the Torah scroll. That volunteer role led eventually to the establishment in many communities of the annual Sisterhood Shabbat, which often provided the first opportunity for congregants to actually see a woman in a leadership role and on the Bima. Such efforts would help generate the cultural shift that was necessary to pave the path for women's ordination. The relentless determination of sisterhood women for 100 years helped unlock the doors to professional Jewish leadership for me, for your wonderful women clergy team here at Emanu-El, and for all of our female colleagues. You placed women around the movement's institutional tables. You carved out new roles for women in the sanctuary, and you helped women discover their spiritual voice in prayer. Your sisterhood and others nurtured the societal changes that were taking place in American Jewish life, and you brought those changes into our synagogues. So thank you from all of us. As I said earlier, throughout our history, women came together for sisterhood and spirituality, and also for social justice. Reformed Jewish women have used their collective power in the pursuit of justice through volunteer work as well as through political action. Your women's group, as you heard, has a long history of volunteerism and interfaith community building. In the 1930s, NFTS, WRJ, established the Jewish Braille Institute, and women's groups like yours brailled Jewish books for decades before modern technology took over. This charitable work continues today, as you heard from Leslie, in support of projects like your Art Center for Seniors, your support of Ronald McDonald House, English in Action, and Project Backpack. Our founding mothers were not silent like our foremothers of ancient days. They had a voice, and they used it to address issues of their day. Our founders were suffragists, advocating for the right to vote. In the 1920s, WRJ women engaged in international peace efforts. In the 1930s, we fought for access to birth control. In the 40s, we helped establish the network of Jewish women's NGOs at the United Nations, the non-governmental organizations. And in fact, WRJ still has representatives in the NGO network at the UN today. In the 60s and 70s, we demonstrated for civil rights, and we spoke out on behalf of gay rights. And in fact, WRJ was the first religious organization in America to take that stand, even before others in the Reform movement. Today, we remain at the forefront of advocacy for women, continuing the struggle for equality and equal pay, for women's health, and sadly, we continue to fight for access to birth control and safe abortions, battles that we thought had been won long ago. So that's a brief overview of our inspiring past. But even more important than the account of history is the story that Reformed Jewish women will create in the future. We know there will be new battles to be fought on behalf of women's rights, glass ceilings that will need to be shattered, and new achievements to be forged. I don't know what the next 100 years will be for women of Emanu-El or for women of Reformed Judaism. But just as surely as there will be rainbows in the sky, I know that we will continue to gather together for sisterhood, for spirituality, and for social justice. We will continue to cultivate women leaders. We will continue to support our youth and our Reform institutions. We will continue to demand our rightful place in Jewish life. And we will continue to speak up for those who have no voice. We may not do it with white serving gloves like those who came before us, but we will continue to do this with determination and with the full knowledge that, as WRJ's motto says, we are stronger together. So thank you to all of the women of Emanu-El for 100 years of dedicated service. May you continue to go from strength to strength. Amen.